Hi guys, welcome back to the Jack Ravel Show. Today, I'd like to welcome Andy Blow to the studio from Precision Hydration. Welcome, Andy.
Hi, Jack. Good to be chatting.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to have you on. So to give everyone a bit of a backstory, Andy was introduced to me through one of our past guests, Claire, who has done her fair share of Ironmans and races over the years and has used Andy's product, Precision Hydration, to essentially get her over the line, without the cramps and without the ag of having to worry about your hydration. And I'll let Andy go into a bit more detail, but the first question I wanted to ask you, Andy, is what is your definition of hydration?
Well, yeah, good. Hydration is the body water, is the levels of water in your body. If you want to be, sort of talking, I guess, from a physiological point of view. But I think the way people use the term hydration in sport is obviously quite a bit wider. It's used to encompass what do you drink when you're exercising. And I found that as an athlete many years ago, I had a bit of a problem. I had a drinking problem, if you like, but not the kind of drinking problem that people would go to AA for. This was getting my drinking right in an endurance event. And so, precision hydration came about to try to educate athletes about what I'd learned, in terms of getting hydration right. So I think in that sense, hydration, the definition more broadly is probably, what do you drink when you're exercising?
And so why is it important to you specifically? And how did it come about that you created a whole company around this exact subject?
It was basically just down to the fact that this was a problem for me as an athlete. And I know that you've been recently getting into Ironman and you've competed in Dubai, and you've sort of experienced what it's like if you don't get your hydration and nutrition exactly right. And what I found as an athlete was that I went into some long, hot races, very fit, very prepared, but still had a terrible outcome and a terrible result because I screwed up my hydration. And so it was learning how to unpick that, learning what I was getting wrong, learning what I didn't know about my body and how it responded in the heat, ultimately led to me getting better performances. And as you'll know, the amount of effort that you put into these things, and the time and the money and everything that kind of goes into doing these things, if you then get the result that you want, it's so fulfilling and it's so great. And the opposite is true. If it goes badly, it's catastrophic. And so once I'd kind of figured it out for myself, it was like, well, the natural next step is take this to other people, because if it helped me, it can help other people. And that was the seed that sowed precision hydration, really.
It's a really good, valid point you just mentioned there about the fact that, for anyone listening that's raced anything endurance wise, whether it be a half marathon, Ironman, whatever, how much training goes into doing these sorts of races. But then it can all just go completely tits up when you get cramp in the final 10K, or even right at the beginning, because you've either, overhydrated or underhydrated in the build-up. I know personally, I've read, and as it goes, the carb loading thing before a big race, and there's all arguments to say that's good and arguments to say that's bad, but it's that whole thing of people panic, I think, before big races because of the nerves around it, and then can sometimes ruin their whole race based on just a silly amount of extra this or not enough of that. So when it comes to hydrating, we all know that we should be drinking between 2 and 4 liters of water a day, and the sort of government guidelines and stuff like that. But in your opinion, what is that? Is that enough, or do we need to supplement with more things, or is there not enough in our waters that we're maybe not getting?
It's an interesting question, because those sort of like guidelines, there are actually no really official guidelines on fluid consumption, because there's lots of suggested guidelines, and the classic one that a lot of people have heard is that you should drink 8 glasses of water a day. But that is just so far from the truth in terms of it's such an overgeneralization. Like, we definitely know that drinking every day is necessary to keep you alive and healthy. Although you can probably go in extreme circumstances a day or two without drinking, but it's pretty nasty because you get really quite thirsty really quite quickly, and it's 3 days later you probably are dead. On the flip side, how to sort of like tell people how much water they need is almost impossible, because every individual person's needs are so wildly different. especially when it comes to athletes, because there's a kind of a basic level of water that you might need to consume if we assume you're doing nothing, like some of us have been in lockdown some of the time. You're like in your house, you're not really doing anything. You can probably survive on quite a low fluid intake. As soon as you go out and start doing the type of training sessions that endurance athletes do, though, you can sweat 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 litres of sweat out a day quite easily. And then you're in a whole different world, because replacing that plus everything else you need multiplies up. And we get into this, the idea that when you start sweating a lot, and this is what we sort of specialise in, is you need electrolytes with it, particularly sodium, because that's what you lose in your sweat. And so one of the things that we've tried to do with pH over the years is communicate to people that hydration guidelines can never be generalised. They've got to be individualised. So it always starts with a conversation of like, okay, Jack, what are you doing? What are your needs? As opposed to what do we generally need?
It's fascinating because, as you said, everybody's different. But I suppose the question I've got for you is, how are we different? If everybody we know sweats, or I suppose that, well, actually, better question, does everybody sweat the same?
So I think sweating, you've got 2 dimensions to sweating. You've got how much do you sweat, and you've got what's in your sweat. And if we talk about how much you sweat, first of all, it's pretty obvious that some people just sweat more than others, because you can go for a jog with a friend and one of you might be absolutely dripping and pouring. And if I go running with people, that's usually me. I'm like the one, I sweat like nothing, all over the place. My shirt is soaked. Other people sweat very lightly. And that's just kind of genetics, fitness, different factors that come into it. But we can see quite a wide variety in that. And then on top of that, you've got like what's in the sweat. And that was the really interesting bit for me as an athlete, because I didn't realise that what you sweat out can be different from person to person, because you lose electrolytes in your sweat. And the main one that you lose is sodium, because that's the main electrolyte that's in your extracellular fluid in the body. And the difference from person to person can be up to 10-fold. So some people can lose 200 milligrams of sodium in a litre of sweat, and other people can lose 2,000. And the average is somewhere between those two. I'm up on that higher end, and that, coupled with having a very high sweat rate, meant that in races, my battle was less to do with getting enough fluid in and more to do with getting enough electrolytes in with the fluid I was taking to meet those losses. So there's this kind of individual mix that once you, at a low level, when you're not doing a lot of sweating, drinking water when you feel thirsty, eating foods which will have some sodium and electrolytes in, your body takes care of the rest. It's not a complicated subject. When you start going out exercising for 7 or 8 hours in hot weather and might sweat 1.5 litres an hour, all of a sudden individualizing your electrolyte replacement, your fluid replacement becomes a little bit more critical. And that's kind of where we come in with what we do.
So getting a bit technical here, what happens to your body when you don't have enough, first of all, water or hydration within it, and second of all, enough sodium in there what does it cause your body to do, and how does it sort of affect you?
Yeah, so dehydration, from an athletic perspective, when you become dehydrated when you're doing sport, the main thing that happens is that your blood volume decreases. So you've got less watery bit in your blood, less plasma, which makes it harder for the body to pump blood around, to work your muscles and to the skin, to cool. It means it's actually harder to sweat, because sweat is drawn from your blood plasma, so you can't cool as effectively, and ultimately you basically slow down. So what you'll find if you measure your heart rate, for example, like a lot of athletes do, is that you can be running along or cycling along at the same pace, but as you become progressively dehydrated, your heart rate will go up and up and up, and your sensation of effort will go up. So you feel like what felt easy after 40 minutes, after 2 hours, if you've not drunk anything, could feel really, really hard, because your body's trying to slow you down so you don't overheat and hurt yourself. So like dehydration per se is a problem of blood volume for athletes mainly. Chronic dehydration can have other problems, because you have a lot of water inside your cells and stuff, and that can cause cellular damage and shrinkage, but that's less problematic in the short term for most athletes, because you usually turn up to an event or a training session relatively well hydrated on that level. When you get the sodium balance wrong, what usually happens is you start, and getting the sodium balance wrong, like if you're sweating out quite a lot of fluid and quite a lot of salt, but drinking just plain water, which is what a lot of athletes do, you gradually dilute the electrolyte levels in your blood. And then you get this kind of, the problem that you have is not related to dehydration because you've got enough water on board, or you might even have too much water on board. You get your blood shifts from your bloodstream into the body's cells and they swell up, and you can get a condition called hyponatremia where it affects your brain and it causes your brain to be sort of ultimately crushed against your skull. And there's been a lot of recorded instances of hyponatremia in endurance athletes, people basically not taking enough sodium and or drinking too much water. And if it goes unchecked, it can kill people. So people dying of it is not super common. It's more common than it needs to be, unfortunately. But because again, going back to Ironman, because I know it's a sport you know well, like they reckon about 10% of finishers in Ironman races finish a little bit hyponatremic. And there's probably a death from hyponatremia once every 2 or 3 years in Ironman races. And we see it in marathons and other things. So it's a real problem. And I think the first step on like helping to prevent it from happening is getting people to understand that, as you alluded to before, hydration is this kind of like balancing act. It's like you can definitely not drink enough, but you can also drink too much, and getting the needle in the middle for you is where the trick is.
So as a amateur athlete listening, someone who's into their running, maybe likes going cycling, and is kind of interested in hearing more about how they could potentially monitor their hydration levels without sort of needing to, buy really expensive equipment or do blood tests or whatever, what are the signs that people can look out for that they're either hydrated or dehydrated?
With dehydration, the big signs day to day are, the really obvious one is thirst. Like if you're thirsty, then that's a good sign that you're becoming dehydrated, because that's usually your body's way of, your body monitors your blood volume and it monitors the amount of salt in your blood. And as you lose more fluid, the salt level in your blood rises and you feel thirsty. It's the same reason for why you feel thirsty if you eat a bag of crisps or peanuts with lots of salt on. You need to dilute it. So thirst is obviously a big one. Another one which is commonly used is like looking at the color of your pee. So when you pee, if it's really dark, that can be a sign that you're also becoming dehydrated. That's not a foolproof method because other things can cause your urine to be colored or concentrated, but certainly like when you first get up in the morning, when you have a pee, if it's quite dark and you feel thirsty, that's a pretty good sign you're sort of starting the day dehydrated. And then another one is like big fluctuations in your body weight. So if some athletes weigh themselves pretty regularly, so have a good idea of what a stable body weight is for them. And if you're regularly the day after a big day of training, like a kilo or more down on what you were the day before, it's unlikely that that's going to be purely fat loss or purely carbohydrate burned. There's going to be a fluid loss component. So we always say to athletes, if you can do a 3-point check, if you can weigh yourself in the morning, if you can see whether your pee is dark and if you're thirsty, like if you're down on weight, if you're thirsty and your pee is really dark, then you probably are dehydrated. And then they're all kind of good signs to read.
It's interesting because I've got a background in the modeling world, and there's been all these jokes flying around for the last, forever, that if you want to cut down for a men's health cover, for example, you've got to not drink anything for 3 days so that your body just goes and like shrivels up. But then for people that don't necessarily know how much they drink, or maybe have that problem, they wake up in the morning, pee's a certain color, they feel thirsty. Is it okay for them, or is it good for them to then just go and neck a liter of water? Is that going to solve the problem, or is it more of something that you need? It's a gradual increase in which your body needs to take on that water over time.
I think it's sort of all relates to the way in which dehydration has crept up on you. So if dehydration has crept up on you slowly over a number of days, and you've gradually become more and more and more dehydrated, the chances are you're more dehydrated at a cellular level as well as in your blood. And so kind of the recovering more slowly from that is going to be needed, because you're going to need to drink, absorb the water. It's going to need to go into your bloodstream. The body will then distribute it, because the body's really good at homeostasis in all sorts of ways, especially in fluid distribution. It moves fluid around to get everything back to normal. So I would anticipate that if you've descended into dehydration quite slowly over a number of days, then you're probably going to have to climb out of it over a number of days. I think so. Necking a litre of water, you'll probably end up just peeing over half of it out. You know, it's like, it feels like the right solution, but it's probably, you've got to take your time. I would say though, when you're exercising, you can lose a lot of fluid really quickly, which is largely going to deplete your blood volume. And in those occasions, a little bit more of an aggressive intake. Like we know athletes, and I wouldn't recommend this for everyone at all, but we do know athletes that will drink a litre an hour when they're exercising hard in hot conditions. And that'll have a lot of sodium with it to ensure its absorption. But in those occasions, like when you're acutely getting dehydrated through a lot of sweating, you can acutely counterbalance that with quite an aggressive fluid intake, if that makes sense. So it's sort of like, think about the slope into dehydration is probably similar to the slope out of it, if that makes sense.
So can you over hydrate before, say, a race? I've read something, there's a term called preloading. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, overhydration before races is definitely a pretty common thing, because like you said before races, athletes get quite nervous. They want a carbo load because that makes sense to make sure your glycogen stores are fully charged. And I think some of them apply the same extension of logics, like, well, I'm going to drink more because I'll absorb more water and be better hydrated. And you can't really absorb and hold on to a lot more water than you carry around on a normal day-to-day basis. So when you drink a lot more in the build-up to a race, what tends to happen is you pee a lot more, and then you end up weeing out a lot of electrolytes with that, and you end up almost mildly hypernatremic beforehand. And again, studies have shown, there was a study at a big Greek ultra marathon where they took blood samples from starters and found that 10% of those guys were not dehydrated, were hypernatremic before the gun went off. And the mindset there is probably, I'm going to do a really long hot race, so I've drunk like a camel beforehand. So the term preloading is one that really, it's one we use a lot at PH to describe using a very strong electrolyte drink. Like we make one called PH 1500, which has 1500 milligrams of sodium in it per litre. And you don't need to take a lot of that, but you can take a bit. We usually recommend about half a litre, about an hour before you go out and exercise. And that sort of can top your hydration levels up if you're a bit behind, or even sort of slightly super compensate you, because the extra sodium pulls fluid into the bloodstream and holds it there. And you do then end up preloading a little bit topped up before you start. So we've actually, for your show notes, we've got an interesting blog that kind of breaks the science of that down. So if people are listening to this and they're athletes and they think, oh, I'd like to learn a bit more about that, we can share the show notes on that one for sure.
Absolutely. I'll include that in the show notes below, because it's fascinating how you think about training. And, most people would think, right, you just, do this, do that, kind of do it over and over again, and you'll get better and better as you go. But the fact that you're ignoring is the machine that's making you go forward. It's your body is essentially the thing that's even getting you to do that in the first place. And fuel is a big part of that. But people don't think about the hydration side of fuel a lot. They think about food. They think food is fuel, but actually, hydration, what are we, 75% water anyway? It's such a big part of it. So why do you think people ignore their hydration so much more than they do their food intake?
Yeah, good question. I reckon some of it's got to do with the industry, if you like, the way that things are portrayed. Like there are a lot of hydration supplements and brands and stuff on the market for sure, but there's probably 10 times that amount of nutritional products and supplements. So the idea that getting nutrients in and macronutrients in to fuel performance is pretty well established. Also, I think it's a bit easier to make recommendations on exactly the amount of fuel and calories that people need to fuel exercise compared to hydration needs, which are all over the map. So because you and I could go out and do exactly the same training session on different days, just with different environmental conditions, and one day you might be able to cruise through the whole session with less than one bottle of drink, and on another day you might need 4 bottles of drink to do the same session. So I guess people's sort of the recommendations that they read are all over the map, and therefore it's like harder to home in on like, what should I do? And sometimes when things get overcomplicated, people don't engage with them as much, you know. And also, although and in recent years there's been this kind of this idea that actually what we should teach athletes to do is drink to thirst. So you should be instinctive, which is what a lot of people do most of the time. And obviously when you're not training and competing, that is mostly what you do. You drink when you're thirsty. And that idea has really taken hold, and it has a lot of merit in terms of, I think it's valid to listen to your body when you're doing stuff. But at the same time, if what's been proven time and time again when you're doing long endurance events is that if you just listen to your thirst, you probably under drink in the early stages and then need to catch up later on, which then becomes problematic because you can't absorb it fast enough. And so I think some of it's like, why don't people take hydration seriously? Some of it's like confusion, lack of knowledge. Also, if you just drink to thirst or drink instinctively, you will still probably get round and finish whatever you're doing. You know, you're not going to run into like horrific problems, but you're probably also not going to optimize your performance. So I wonder whether there's just this element that people think they're doing okay because they're getting round, but actually it's that hydration element for some people, because it was certainly holding me back, you know, as an athlete. And when I turned the corner with that, it was a big change.
I know this from personal experience, but when you get a new customer, you offer free consultations, right? To anyone that was sort of confused as to why or what they need from a hydration, I suppose, supplement, right? Why do you do that? What's the main reason that you kind of offer that service to new customers and don't just say, yeah, go and buy that product?
I think it's because we view the idea of like using the products properly as being the most important thing, because there's so many hydration products out there, and as there are in every walk of life, there's so many products available to us these days to solve every problem. When you drill down into most of them though, they only solve the problem if they use them correctly. So we started to get frustrated early on about seeing the way products were being used, people not mixing them in the right amounts of water, people not taking them at the right time or in the right quantities, and therefore there becomes this negative spiral of like, well, I've tried that, it doesn't work, and you know, we don't see them again. And we want to develop long-term relationships with the athletes that use our products, our customers. And we found that when they were emailing in and asking us questions, often what you wanted to do is hop on a video call with someone and talk to them. And then with the lockdown last year and COVID and everything, that it became a reality. That was the only way that we could really communicate with athletes. So we kind of put this out there to say, well, if you want to use our products, if you've got a question about them or want to learn how to use them better, then get on a video call. And immediately it was like mega popular. We've had to get better technology in now to actually manage the call bookings and that sort of thing. And it's been so rewarding because we get to chat for a few minutes with people, really understand, first of all, whether they are a legitimate like target for using our products or not. And we're not afraid to advise them if they're not. You know, it's like we'd rather not sell you something if it's not going to work for you. And then if it does, hopefully you learn from that experience, you get more out of it, and then we see you again in the future. And that's the best thing really for us.
Well, speaking from experience, that's exactly how I came about from you. For everyone listening, I ran my first half Ironman in Dubai about this time last year, came off the back of it with probably about 25 to half an hour's worth of cramp time added on to my race. And spoke to a guy who said, check out Precision Hydration. They are the kings at this and they will sort you out. So I kind of found the product online, and then it had this call, and I spoke to, I think, a chap called Luke, maybe, who was kind of gave me the rundown, and I used them all last year training for my full Ironman, and I didn't get cramp once in my entire full Ironman race. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because cramp was the reason I wanted to use your product. So first of all, before we go into this, what is cramp? How does cramp affect you?
Cramp is usually a term which is used to describe like when your muscle locks out, so it goes into a maximum contraction, so it's really painful. So anyone who's had a cramp will instantly know what I'm talking about, and other people who haven't think, what is this weird thing where you see someone rolling around in the floor like they've been shot? But it's like because your muscles just go absolutely like solid and like you've maximally contracted it. And I used to get it all the time when I was racing, and there's all this controversy about whether cramping is down to dehydration and electrolyte imbalance, and scientists will argue till the cows come home about whether it does or doesn't. I think practically what we see in the field is that quite often cramping in endurance sports is related to some sort of dehydration or electrolyte imbalance thing. And you know, what if you get your hydration and electrolyte supplementation right, as you found, quite often it can be a ticket to avoiding cramps, which will then, they're one of those things that if they set in during a half Ironman run or an Ironman run or something, they can easily add an hour to your time, which is just soul destroying. So they are a really hot button topic. And it's interesting that you say that you found us because of like solving that problem, because that was ultimately probably the biggest identifiable problem that I was having that led me to sort of look into all of this. And then I would say a huge amount of the really positive customer emails that we get from people are from people who say, I've been cramping for years and then I've tried this and all of a sudden it's gone away. And it's just brilliant to hear those stories. So it definitely does work for some people. Because
you've got the products I've used are your pH 1500 and your salt tablets. And there's, now that I've gotten more into this, I've looked into it in my own research and sort of thing. And there's some articles that say you can't eat enough salt tablets. There's, you know, that you can just pop them like Smarties and they just keep you going. And then there's other arguments to say that it can actually harm your race, just like what with preloading more, you know, with too much hydration and that sort of thing. What's your opinion on that? Can you eat too many salt tablets?
You definitely can. And I think although it's a dangerous thing to say, but I'll say it with a caveat, is that you're probably better off in a really long hot race taking a little bit more rather than a little bit less, because your body can cope with a little bit of excess. But that definitely isn't licensed to just pop them like Smarties or something. You've got to have a handle on what is a high dosage and a low dosage and sort of work within the guidelines, because it's like anything. The big challenge for your body during exercise is to maintain homeostasis. And if you put in the right kind of inputs, you know, carbs, fluids, salts, to keep it roughly right, your body does a great job of working out the details and keeping you going at your optimal pace. If you suddenly dump 5 times more salt than you need into the body has to respond, because it has to clear some of that from the bloodstream. It's going to make you probably make you sick because it needs to get rid of some of it. It's certainly going to need to make you pee some of it out. It might cause you to retain fluid, which will make you feel really uncomfortable and could make you ill. So whilst the target to hit there with the amount that you want to take in is probably relatively large, it's not a case of like just more is better. And I would always caution against any sort of like advice that alludes to that being true.
We talked a lot about endurance sports, mostly running and cycling and Ironmans and that sort of thing. But do your products help other types of sports? You know, football, rugby, cricket, wrestling, whatever anyone's into. How do they sort of help people with something that's maybe not as endurance focused? Yeah, well, it's a good question. A lot of our customers outside of endurance sports are in team sports. So Premier League football teams, lots of NFL teams, lots of Major League Baseball teams and NBA teams in the US. And they tend to use the products either for very hot weather conditions, so when there's just naturally a high sweat output, and they'll do a lot of what we talked about, the preloading and using the products to rehydrate and recover. And also, I think what people sometimes forget about, you know, footballers, for example, is that whilst their game is only 90 minutes, their training load through the week is pretty high. And if you go to a pre-season summer training camp for a football team, they're doing a lot of hours of training and they will do a lot of hours of sweating. So it sort of aligns with like anyone who sweats a lot, basically, which has also led us into other areas. So we've recently been supplying a lot of products into a firefighting college in Texas, where they do, you know, the guys wear a lot of protective clothing. They're in and out of hot facilities doing the training to tackle big fires. It's also hot and humid in Texas most of the year round. So the pressure on there, like they just do a lot of sweating. So all of a sudden, like understanding electrolyte balance and having electrolytes in the water they drink is quite helpful to them. And it's the same with a business in Australia that we work with on the
on the Gold Coast and in the Northern Territories where it gets really hot and humid, and they have people welding railway tracks and fixing railway bridges and that sort of thing. And they issue our products to some of the guys because it just helps to keep them safe basically at work in hot environments.
Because I think what comes to mind then is I think to myself, I've always trained, I've always been an athlete, and I know lots of my friends are athletes and sort of do their various sports in their own right. And they sort of think if I get a sweat on, I've had a good workout. But there are days when you haven't done anything and you're still sweating. And I wouldn't feel like I've done a workout, but yet I'd still probably need to take some sort of supplement to replace those sweats. But that's just because I'm aware of it. For people that aren't aware of that, how important is it for you to kind of replace those electrolytes, even if you're not exercising, you're just in a hot environment or it's a hot day or whatever it might be?
I think it's ultimately always really important. If you're in a hot and humid environment, you're sweating a lot, then electrolyte replacement is important. And it's interesting when you go to places that are hot and humid a lot of the time. So if you go to South Florida, or if you go to Asia, to like Malaysia and Singapore and places like that, people's habits and what they eat on their foods and the amount that they drink and stuff is quite ingrained, because they've figured out by trial and error over many, many years, like what they need to do to replace what they're losing. I think the people that are most at risk of having problems are, say, those of us that live in the UK where it's like cool and temperate most of the time, and then suddenly off you go to Miami, or out you go to Kuala Lumpur and you're working out in the heat, or even just holidaying, and like you're just not used to those hot conditions, and then your body's not adapted, your mind's not adapted, and your behaviors aren't adapted. So when I travel, if I go to Florida, then I'll be straight onto the precision hydration products when I land, even if I'm not training for a day or two, because I'm just going to be pouring with sweat, so.
You've got your extra suitcase with all your powders and all your tablets in it, ready to go.
Exactly, yeah.
Love that. So, Andy, what are you working on at the moment? What's, this has been, 10 years in the making? You've brought out various different products and stuff, but what are you working on right now that's kind of exciting you?
The next step for us is starting to look at fueling for athletes as well, because obviously the video calls that we've been having over the last 12 to 18 months with athletes have opened a whole Pandora's box of like, what are the questions that people want to know? Because when they start talking to us about hydration, often that leads into then a wider topic around, okay, well, what do I eat with as well, the fueling stuff? And what we noticed is that in the fueling sort of product space, although there's loads of fantastic products out there, the messaging around them is all quite messy. And so what we're looking to do is build some recommendation, and we've built some recommendation algorithms so that very much like with the hydration stuff, people can punch some details in on our website, start to get some recommendations on how much fueling they'll need to do certain activities at different paces, different durations. And then we're sort of working on a suite of products at the moment. So sort of drinks with carbohydrate in, different forms of carbohydrate like gels and bars and chewy blocks and things like that. So that we can then sort of like stretch this education around hydration into fueling as well. So that's like phase 2 for us, which is just getting underway really.
Brilliant. You have to let me know when that all comes out, because that sounds amazing. I spent hours and hours toying and playing with different types of foods for my fueling when I was running last year for racing, training for my race. And I think my go-to was peanut butter and jam sandwiches on like thick bread, which was like we go to. But the guy I raced with used to take, he was a plant-based athlete. So what he'd do is he boiled down potatoes, Swedes, carrots, like whatever he could into a mush, and then blend it and then put it in these little pouches, almost like the kind of Capri Sun style things you used to get as a kid. And he just had like 2 or 3 of them on him all the time. And he said for digestion reasons, they were much better than necessarily some of the sort of off the shelf gels, because the body was more used to the type of food than necessarily kind of the foreign, maybe slightly sugary version of something similar.
Yeah, there's definitely, like, you've hit the nail on the head with the sort of the process of what athletes go through. There's like usually a massive process of trial and error to figure out what works for your body. Some people really respond well to like high sugars. Other people need more slower release kind of foods and things like that, because whatever you're habituated to eating will definitely influence your gut's ability to digest that stuff. So one of the things that we're trying to do with our calculators and products is cut down the amount of trial and error that you need to do. We're not going to say that we can like off the bat give you a fueling plan that will be perfect, but what we want to be able to do is say, right, Jack, based on what you've told us, you know, how fast you're going, how far you're going, what type of activity you're doing, you're likely to need, you know, 50 grams of carbohydrate an hour, and actually because you're doing X, Y, and Z, it might be best done as like half liquid and half chewy blocks or solid food or something like that. And so when that's ready, we can definitely send you a link to run through the calculator and send you some products to try out.
Absolutely. If you need a guinea pig, hands up right here. That's for you. That's exactly what I'd like. That'd be great. So I want to take it all the way back to the beginning, and I want to just ask you, how has precision hydration evolved since day one, when you decided that this is a problem that needs solving, not just for me, but for the greater good, for the greater public?
When I found out about, so my big discovery, if you like, personally, was finding out that I lost a lot of salt in my sweat, which was discovered because a friend of mine happens to be a very smart guy who's a heart surgeon called Dr. Raj Jutli. And when I described to him my problems in races, and he looked at photos of me at the finish with salt all over my kit, he was like, you're losing a lot of salt, I think. So let's confirm this. And he took me to a hospital. We got a sweat test done. And sure enough, he was right. And that was like the light bulb moment for me, because as soon as we started to then adjust the salt intake in my races, the sodium intake, everything got better. And at that point, that was towards the end of my triathlon racing, serious triathlon racing days. But I had enough time to try it out and think, yeah, this works. And then my next transition was to working with athletes. So I was a physiologist and a sports scientist and a coach, sort of working with athletes. So I bought a sweat testing machine, started testing athletes. And that was where, once we started to get some progress, thinking, actually, no, this is quite applicable to a lot of other people, it became really interesting to think, oh, could this be a business? And it is quite a long and convoluted story, of which I won't certainly bore you with the full sort of details, but I had a lot of help and assistance from a whole range of people, including the people that manufactured the sweat testing kit, and a bunch of friends who all pitched in when I went around. I didn't really know what I was doing at the time, but I guess I was kind of pitching my business idea, really. And I got some people who wanted to support it, and they helped get the business off the ground. And that led to then products being developed and all that sort of thing. So although it started off, there was like a business angle to it. It didn't start in the way of like, we didn't sit around trying to think of an idea for a startup or something. It was just like, we've solved this, or we think we can solve a problem here. And then the business coalesced around it. So it was a funny few years. That was probably between 2008, 2009 and 2011 when we actually got the company going.
Fantastic. And so looking back on the last 10, 11, 12 years of you sort of on this journey, what is the biggest lesson you've learned about yourself and kind of what you've discovered and essentially helped other people with?
One of the really big things has been just that growing a business and running a business from an idea, because everyone there's like a million good ideas in the world. We all wake up every day and we have good ideas, but taking a good idea, even if it is a truly good idea, and making it into a sustainable business is incredibly hard, you know, and probably so hard that if someone had told me how hard it was going to be on day one, I would not have started it. You know, honestly, there's been times when I would have gladly, you know, we've all probably been there, but I would have gladly put my hands up and walked away. But what I've learned through that, I guess, is that like with sport, like with anything, you know, you do have to put in the hard yards and you've got to plug away. In business, what I've learned is that you've got to surround yourself, you've got to recognize your strengths and weaknesses, and you've got to surround yourself with a great team of you know, people that are like-minded in some ways, but also bring a lot of strengths that you don't bring and can work together. And I've been fortunate in gradually sort of like, you know, people joining in or getting involved along the way who've really built the business into what it is, because you can't do it on your own. And you know, there's a whole list of people now that work in the business. I say a whole list, there's 10 or 11 of us, depending on full-time and part-time. And like everyone brings different skill sets, and and works together. But I would say it's all about that sort of people. If you've not run a startup or run your own business, people probably underestimate what it takes to take a concept to reality, you know, because who knew that one day I'd need to understand European Union legislation for labeling food products, or what kind of documentation you need to ship products into the United States. I mean, once Johnny, my business partner, and I naively packed off a few crates of a few pallets of products off to a warehouse in America for distribution there, and promptly got a note from US Customs a week or two later when it had arrived that they were going to burn it or impound it. You know, it was impounded because we hadn't got the right paperwork, and we had to negotiate a large amount of money to pay for it to be then shipped back. And it was all these things which you think, but I look back now and think, how naive and stupid were we? How can I have thought you could just ship a bunch of nutritional supplement products to the US and hope that they kind of glide through customs, you know? But that's the kind of stupid thing that we did a few years ago. And all of those things have, in their entirety, I've learned masses, like growing a small business, and continue to do so. And then gradually we have this sort of funny chat, Johnny and I, every now and again, about the fact that it used to be every few weeks something would totally freak us out and totally catch us off guard. And we'd always, because early on you have a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of expectation that everything's going to go right, especially I think when you're younger, and especially when you've got less experience. And then gradually you learn that, you know, you may not have a problem today, but you might well have one tomorrow or the next day. And it's just, if you always have this mindset of like, you're going to be overcoming, if it's part of the journey, the process, whatever you want to call it, is really important to kind of embrace that. And whilst you wouldn't rather deal with the US Customs Authority turning your product around, and you learn from it, you get the paperwork right the next time, and you move along. Yeah. So there's been a whole ton of stuff like that.
It's so funny. I'm actually kind of in the last kind of 6 or 7 months, I've started this journey of becoming, you know, a business owner, a business starter, kind of like launching, you know, my coaching business in various different ways. And I totally resonate with what you just said about like being blissfully unaware of what's to come is actually probably a strength, because if you knew what was ahead, you probably wouldn't even bother to go ahead with it. But what also comes across there is the resilience that you had in being able to just not let those huge setbacks, I'm sure at the time, let it define who you were as a person and a company. And I suppose in a way it comes back to probably your mindset around your training as well, you know, being an ultra athlete and kind of knowing like there's a big road ahead, there's a big task ahead, but you know, a flat tire or a bit of cramp or something is not going to define my race. I'm going to push through and continue to race on.
Yeah, I think you need, I don't know whether the resilience kind of, I suppose whether it comes first or it comes after, but definitely you're right. To be an endurance athlete, you're so focused on the end goal normally that gives you the resilience to push through. You accept it's going to be painful, it's going to be a long day, and and you sign up for it with that knowledge in mind. And then when you go into to do the business, I didn't have that mindset to start with. I was very much thought it would be formulaic or easy, or that someone else could tell me what to do. And like the other way around now, I see that with some people who get into sport who think that they need to start out by hiring the best coach, and because they'll be able to tell them what the secrets are and what the tricks are and that sort of thing, when actually probably what you need to do first of all is strap your running shoes on and get out the door and learn a few hard lessons. And so there's this sort of like idea of resilience, and I definitely think growing the business has given me a similar set of skills, but in a different walk of life, which is pretty useful. My brother made me a really nice little brass plaque to put up in the office one time when we'd moved in there, which was unprompted. It was just like a gift that he made me, and it's just said on it, "It's hard to beat the man who never gives up." And I wouldn't have necessarily like associated that phrase with me, but it's become quite important to me now to think back on that phrase as times when you sort of do look at it when you're faced with like another problem. You're like, well, it's true. It is hard to beat the man who never gives up, and you kind of have to become that if you're gonna get anywhere.
Would you say that is the best piece of advice you've been given over the last kind of chapter of your life?
It's up there. It's a good reminder. I would also, though, in a total contrast to it, I would also say you need to know as well where you need to give up, because you can waste a lot of energy like going after being the doggedly determined person. I sometimes see that with athletes. Like as an athlete, I made that mistake, like doggedly persevering through injury, for example, is not the way to do it. Maybe you can refocus some of the energy that you would have put into training into rehabilitation or recovery, but you can't just, dogged determination can grind you into the ground as well. So that, like, it's hard to beat the man who never gives up is true overall, but within that, we do a lot of giving up quite early and easily on things which don't work. So you might develop a new product that you've spent ages doing it, but it doesn't sell, and you've got to just basically, you've got to have the balls to shelve it and move along with all the sunk cost that sits behind it, because forcing a square peg into a round hole is not a good way to spend your days.
It's so funny because I've read plenty of book that says exactly that same thing in a various amount of ways, and it all comes down to you're never going to know until you try. And like with you, you know, if you hadn't have said to your friend who's a doctor, I wonder why I'm sweating so much, and I wonder why I'm left with all the salt on my clothes when I finish a race, and if he hadn't have then said, well, maybe we'd test it, and then you kind of pushed, you could have just left it at that, and you could have just been going on blissfully unaware of actually this huge problem that people have. But the fact that you tried it, and I'm sure there's plenty of things that you've tried that haven't worked and then maybe have been revisited, but every time you've learned something about the journey you've been on, and even right now, as you said before, this time in COVID where you've been speaking to more people online and through video calls has created a new set of products that you're going to push forward through, because it's come from, you know, talking to people that are actually using your products and are asking questions outside of kind of your realm of expertise, so to speak. It's like, what else is going on for you? And I think that's so important to kind of always be curious, I think, is one thing that comes out of that, but also be open to not knowing, be open to understanding that you don't know everything. And trying.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you kind of you can do a lot of theorizing, but ultimately at some point you've got to put your balls on the line and like do it and try it and commit a little bit, and then once you've done that, you're in a much stronger position to know whether, like we did that. There wasn't a big downside to it, but we put those offered to have customer calls out there, knowing that, and almost like thinking it might fall flat on its face. And then we had like 76 bookings in the first 2 weeks. We're like, holy shit, we've got the opposite problem now. We've got to actually like tool up to be able to deliver this because we've promised it. And occasionally things like that happen, but you don't know that because we all sat around and debated it. But at the end of the day, until you push the button, and as they say in the software, the Silicon Valley sort of world, you have to ship the product, you know, and then get on and ship it and then adapt it or shelve it or whatever. But yeah, don't put it out there, basically.
Exactly. A couple of questions before we go. I'm really interested to know who inspires you, Andy. Who inspires you to do what you do?
Lots of different people on a day-to-day basis. Genuinely, the people that I work with, you know, like the whole team at PH, they just sort of, especially, we have a call during the lockdown when we're all working from home and stuff. We have a call at 9:30 and 4 o'clock every day, and genuinely, I look forward to those calls every single time, because there's banter, there's like stuff people have been doing and that kind of thing. So the team, without them, I would, and especially without wishing to single too many people out, like without three of the people that have been on the journey for the most critical period of time has been Johnny, my business partner, Dave, who's our marketing director, and Sean, who's based over in Canada. And without those guys, you know, like there's been plenty of times when I'd have given up, you know. So they've been hugely inspiring. I also draw a massive amount of inspiration from books. I do a lot of reading. If you're interested, or anyone who's like startup orientated is interested, although they're a huge company now, the book about Nike by Phil Knight called Shoe Dog is a really, really inspiring business story. And so I know a lot of people, Nike doesn't have necessarily the best overall reputation in the corporate world, but I think the story of how that business started and was dedication and the risks that were taken there is incredible.
Yeah.
So that's hugely inspiring. And yeah, they would be two like really, really strong things.
And if you were to go back to the beginning and kind of know what was ahead of you and know that you had to go through it and that you were going to go through it and it was going to be this journey you were going to take with precision hydration, what would you tell yourself on day one?
That would be really difficult, because I don't know if you really, really knew what was up ahead in that. I don't know whether you'd really have the kahunas to take it on or not, because there's been some really low times, some real like close to the edge of the business failing and all that sort of stuff. But I suppose if I was in that position, I would just have to say, like, dig in and keep putting one foot in front of the other, because there will be, as long as it's more good than bad. I mean, there's that thing that's doing the rounds on the internet at the moment with an athlete called Alexi Papas, who was interviewed by Rich Roll, talking about the thirds. When you're going for a big goal, because like growing your own business or whatever is a pretty big goal. And her coach said to her once, if you're feeling crap, then like a third of the time you should be feeling really good when you're training for this goal. A third of the time should be like, okay. And a third of the time you're probably going to feel crap. And that is definitely, I've been doing a lot of thinking on that recently, because I think if those balances get really out of whack, if you're feeling crap about what you do like 3/4 of the time consistently, then you've got to look at what you do. But I reckon on balance, I would tell myself that, look, if you get after this with the right attitude, there's going to be more good than bad. And that's what you've got to hope for. That's what you've got to strive for.
I think that's, I love that. And I think that the one thing that comes to mind there is that, the only constant in life is change, really. And so, if you are having a bad time, and I'm sort of quite topical at the moment, because there is a lot of people in the world at the moment are having a bit of a shit time, whether it be in business or personal, or whatever it might be. But I think that the nice thing that always gets me through bad days is that things will always change. Things will get better, worse. And it's that roller coaster of emotions that you're going to be on. So it's almost like just ride the wave as you're hitting it. And as you said yourself, if you know that there are good times to come out of the bad and vice versa, you can just celebrate those wins and kind of respect those darker times, and just understand that it's about the journey. Because if you didn't have those elements of the ups and downs, it would kind of be a bit bland, really, wouldn't it? You just kind of do it.
Oh, for sure. I think that another inspirational thing for me has been reading the book called The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek, where he talks about, long-term thinking with a higher purpose, as it were. So when things are bad, you can still anchor yourself on the long-term outcome, and it helps to guide your day-to-day decision making. It helps you ride those times out, because if you've got your eyes down the road, it sort of doesn't necessarily matter how you feel today, because like you say, it might get worse before it gets better, but it will probably get better at some point. And that type of mentality is, I guess, though, is something that's really, really hard to teach, because if you have to sort of, to a certain extent, live it, I guess. Having read his book retrospectively, having gone through a load of bad times, it's like really easy to see the wisdom in it. If you read it before, if you've had a fairly cushy life, as I probably had, growing up and all that sort of stuff, and not a lot of exposure to big problems, then until you've bumped into some of those issues, then I don't know how valuable that is. So yeah.
Hindsight's the beautiful thing in the world. And I really like what you said there about kind of realizing the end game is important. The journey, I think, is the fun bit, but the destination is the important bit. And it's like it's like plugging a GPS. If you're going to drive from London to Newcastle, you could quite easily just jump on the M1 and you would be there. But let's say there's roadworks and like blockages and all sorts, you're going to have to go in a squiggly line some way in order to get there, which is kind of the metaphor of life, really. You are going to get roadblocks. You are going to get things that point you in a different direction. You're going to get things that sway you off course. But ultimately, if you know where that end destination is, you know where you're going, then it doesn't matter, because that's the thing that keeps you going. It's the passion that keeps those dark days bright, and those brighter days even brighter. So yeah, it's good. But as you said, it's a philosophy that only makes sense once you've been through it.
I reckon so. Yeah.
Good. Andy, this has been Fantastic. I've absolutely loved having a chat with you about all things hydration and cramping and everything in between. Where can people find more about you and precision hydration and sort of more about the company if they wanted to learn a bit more?
The best place to start is going to be our website, which is precisionhydration.com. We've got, for technical information and blogs and performance and hydration advice, there's our sort of knowledge centre bit, our blog page, and it's all keyword searchable. I'd say if people are really interested in what we do, sign up for the newsletter. You can sign up for that in the top bar of our website. We put performance newsletter out every single week, which is very practical and designed to help endurance athletes be better at what they do. It's really popular. And then the other thing is, if you've got like hyper specific questions, just to book a call with us, because that's available through the website as well. So you can get on a one-to-one video call and, like you did, and chat to myself or one of the team and sort of chew the fat on everything. We're also on all the usual social medias as well, at Precision Hydration. Fantastic.
I will link all of that and more in the show notes below, because we've had a lot of links and a lot of things to reference in today's episode. From me, Andy, this has been amazing, and I look forward to seeing you develop in your products and the things that come out. And I'm going to hold you to that guinea pig experiment if it comes up in the future. I'd love to check out your new products. But from me, thanks very much for coming on.
No, thanks for the invite, and 100%, Jack. We'll put you on the beta testing roster for the product, so expect them in the mail pretty soon.
Love that. Thanks, man. I'll speak to you soon.
Cheers. Bye-bye.